Hello, and welcome to another episode of Kaleidoscope. In celebration of Valentine's Day, we're talking to a couple who have experienced many years in a happy marriage. My guests today are Dorothy and James Mello. Welcome, Jim. Welcome, Dottie.
Thank you.
So glad you're here. This is sort of a conversation about what life brings to you after decades of marriage. It's not an easy institution. And the vows that you make at the beginning are pretty daunting. You know, that till death do you part, or 50% are said to be in divorce. Either way, you either have to have someone pass away, or you have to go through all those legal hassles. So to come together and stay together is such a wonderful message about what love is really about. So I thought you would tell us something about your life together, how you met, and what married life and each challenge that you went by. And then at the end, we're going to give some advice to people who are just starting out in their married life. And that's going to be the fun part, because we'll leave a little legacy of the pitfalls. I've been married 50 years. And to the same person, we must remember, because a lot of my friends said, oh, I've been married 50 years, but they had divorces or widowers. You know, I said, no, it's supposed to be the same person. So, for longevity. So welcome again. I'm going to give it over first to Jim, because I want to hear about how you met Dottie.
Okay, I was a sophomore at City College. Back then it was Southeastern Mass University. Now it's UMass Dartmouth. And I had joined a fraternity in my sophomore year. There was a play in the next town over, and I had agreed to usher at the play. So I had my fraternity blazer on, and I was an usher. A friend of hers she grew up with, invited her to go to the play. I thought was a freshman at UMass, Amherst. Well,
So I was home for the weekend.
yeah, she was home for the weekend. So when the play ended, I was introduced to Dot, and I said, well, we're having a little party now down at the fraternity if you'd like to come. And we can socialize a little bit. So that's really the first time we met, was we went to the fraternity, and we danced and had a beer or two, and then I took her home.
Right. Well, I know there's a little prelude to that, because you both went to the same high school.
Yes, we did. We both went to Buffett High School. Dot was class of 1965, and I was class of 1963.
So,
We didn't know each other in high school.
okay. And so, ironically, years later, you meet at a play.
Right.
And there's another little story we'll mention later on about that 12th night, which I think is really intriguing. So I'm going to let each of you, you're going to be able to contradict each other in case they get it wrong. Because everyone has memories that are slightly different. So when you saw him at that movie theater for the
Oh, it was
play,
high school.
High school auditorium.
the high school
It
auditorium.
was a high school auditorium.
So what did you think?
Oh, he's cute.
But did you recognize him at all from school? No? So
No.
this was
It was
still
a big high school, so you could get lost
We
in the
had
place.
800 kids in our graduating
Oh,
class.
okay. So when you got to college and you went to this play, you didn't even remember him from that.
Oh.
So now we date for a few years or a year,
Yeah,
and
it's at
until
least
you
a
graduated.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of years.
So
Yeah.
we get close to graduation. You graduated first?
I graduated in 1968.
Oh, you went in the army. You had to go in the army.
Yeah, at the end of my fourth year, I hadn't completed all the requirements yet, but the year before, I talking to a fraternity brother in the Vietnam War is building, and he said, well, what are you going to do, next year? And I know, he said, well, you don't want to get drafted, do you? I said, no. So the very next day, I went down to see the Coast Guard recruiter. I said, I'd like to get in the Coast Guard or the Coast Guard Reserves. And he looked at me and said, well, I'll put you on my second list. I said, second list? He said, yes. I said, well, when am I likely to get a call from you? He said, in about 18 months. Well, that wasn't going to work. So right behind the school, the college I was going to, was a armory, National Guard Armory. I walked in, and the whole place is dark except for one office. And sitting behind the desk is this fellow who I later learned was a staff sergeant. And I said, he said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'd like to enlist in the National Guard. Okay, here, fill out the paperwork. I filled out the paperwork. The next day he called me and he said, Jim, you still want to get in? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I got 8 guys ahead of you, but you look pretty good, so I'll take you. And that's how I got in.
Oh, seems like.
And
you
right
might have-
away.
You might have said the same thing when you said, it looks pretty good, I'll take him.
So, but I had to stay as a private E1 for a whole year because I hadn't gone to basic training yet.
Oh,
So the summer of '67,
Because you did some more school.
I did more school. So the summer of '67, July or August, I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana.
now where in this had you started dating seriously, or you had,
Oh, we were dating.
all right.
Oh, yeah.
So when he
Yeah.
left or had to go somewhere else, that was a concern to you.
Oh, I cried for a whole day.
Oh,
And she wrote to me a lot. Got a lot of letters from
Yeah.
her.
Back
And,
then, people wrote letters with stamps on them.
yeah.
Sent
that sounds-
pictures.
Yes. And so that was a break in your physical, being together.
Yeah.
But it showed that you had some sustainability. You were making the best of a situation which was difficult. And that you were able to, did you get sent to Vietnam?
No, I finished
Really?
my basic training at Fort Polk. Fort Polk, of all the Army posts, is known as one of the worst in terms of facilities.
Oh.
And Louisiana in the summer is hot and humid. There's alligators, there's armadillos, there's
Ew.
snakes. There's,
So you saw Massachusetts as really home.
and then after the, we'd get a chance to call home periodically, and I quickly picked up the Southern drawl. I called her one time and I said, hi Dot, how y'all doing? She didn't know who I was.
Somebody calling you flirting on the phone doesn't sound like your husband. So what were you doing while he was away? Were you finishing
See, it was
school?
summer,
It was
because he
summer.
went away in June. School had finished. And I worked at a camp for the summer.
Mhm.
I worked at the same camp for a few years.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, counselor.
And you were working towards your teaching profession.
yeah, I was
And
headed
then
for
you
the master-
graduate.
bachelor's in English.
Mm-hmm. And then you must have gone on to get your master's in education to be a
Yeah.
public school teacher. That you and I have that in
Mhm.
common. So were you expecting an engagement proposal during this time period, maybe daydreaming about it, or were you happy?
Oh, girls went to like bridal fairs in those days,
Uh-huh.
and you could look at your china, things you want for china, and glassware and silverware, and all of this. And, girls who were engaged already had, bridal magazines and
Mhm.
making their thoughts, plans.
Mhm.
And back then it was like always in the back of your head.
Mhm. Now, did you have siblings that were
No,
older?
I'm an only child.
Oh, you're an only
Still
child,
an
so
only-
they didn't have, your parents didn't have any experience.
Oh, no
weddings
history in
and-
this at all.
So we get to college, we graduate, you meet, you graduate.
Well, I graduated in the winter.
Mhm.
I graduated in 3.5 years. And so I went on to work.
Mhm.
Teaching in
I-
New Bedford.
I got a teaching job in my old junior high, in my old homeroom. It was kind of funny
Yeah, I
to
bet
be
it
back
was.
where I was in 7th grade. Only this
Deja
time I
vu.
was the teacher.
You were the teacher.
And
You know, when I look back at the schools that I went to, every one of them now is a senior center or a senior housing. I said,
Really?
well,
you
this
know
one
you're-
got bulldozed and a new one built in its place. So
You know what's going to happen to all the schools you went to, that they're not going to be there anymore. So now let's get back to the romance. Did you call a lot?
As often as I could.
Yeah.
you couldn't in those days.
We couldn't call home too often. We just weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
And
But
yet
did you come home on leave?
You don't get leave in basic training.
Oh.
You're there for 16 weeks
Oh, right.
with no break, unless there's a death in the family.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a death in the family, you can appeal to, I'm trying to think of the organization, and you might get granted time off to
Time
go.
off.
But
Your grandmother died.
my grandmother
and you
died. The
didn't.
family said,
No.
"Don't bother, stay." And so I was
Because
down
they
there for.
extended you out, didn't
Now,
they?
did you save
Well-
any of those letters that you sent?
Oh, they're in the back. I bet they're in a box up in the attic.
They probably are in the attic.
Oh,
But,
there's things that you said.
yeah, I know.
You know,
She
when
wrote
we
off
moved, I made sure all those things were disappeared.
And
from
I'm
the
afraid
box.
that may be the case.
Yes,
Yeah.
I decided they weren't coming to Massachusetts with us. So we have you now. You're both, you were Portuguese and English, and Jim, you're Portuguese.
Right.
And growing up in a strong ethnic family, there are certain rituals you have to go through before you can even ask someone to marry them. I mean, I'm Italian and Irish and Catholic, and so there were certain requirements of asking the father for permission by the soon-to-be groom, or hopefully to be the groom. And I wondered if you were anxious about doing that. Was that what prolonged, you know,
Oh, sure.
saying, "Oh, geez, you know, should I
sure.
do this?"
Yeah. Dot's father was a proper gentleman. Most of the time he would wear a white dress shirt, even at home. He was a manager at the local Sears store, and that's where he met his wife. She worked in the finance department, and that's where they met. Anyway, naturally I was a little nervous because I lived not really in the country, but
The other end of town.
I was just a young kid, you know, and this was all kind of new to me.
Did you tell your parents first?
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
they
yeah.
said
Oh yeah. No,
that she
fine.
passed.
Oh, they were pleased I was settling down with a nice lady who happened to be a little Portuguese and well educated, and oh yeah, they were. My father was quite pleased, and
Good.
my mother as well. So
Did you hear any nonsense from your family?
No.
No, it's saying, you know, that we're not sure of him, or
No.
you know, that's really good. Now, you picked out the ring
yes,
without any input from your future wife.
right. The wedding ring and the engagement ring. Yeah, I got a little coaching. I had several part-time jobs while I was going to tech, and one of them is I worked at a men's clothing store, and I got pretty friendly with the manager, and being an astute young, 30-some-odd-year-old manager, he was a bachelor, but I sought his advice a little bit. I'm going to what do you think? And so he sent me to a favorite jeweler of his, and he said, "You speak to, I'll say Tony. Speak to Tony, and he'll take good care of you." Well, I didn't have much money, so I bought what I could afford, and I thought the setting was good, and that's how I got the wedding ring.
Yeah. And how long before you asked her did you have the ring?
How long did I have to wait?
How long between your purchase and you asking her officially?
Oh, I think it was only about a week.
Oh, a week.
I have no idea, Jim, of this
I
part.
think it was only about a week.
Oh, a week.
Yeah, that's when we took
Okay.
our ride out to Horseneck Beach.
Right. And that's a very romantic story. But now we're going to shift back to you. What were you thinking about when is he going to ask me? Or is he going to ask me? Or did you just go teaching and
I
left
just kept going teaching and
Mhm.
went to school every day.
But did your father spill the beans about,
No.
he didn't mention that Jim here had called and said, "Can I marry your daughter?"
I think I asked him in person.
Oh, in person.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think it was
It was
over
just
the phone.
across town.
Yeah, I think it was I think it was in the living room.
That's nice. Now, we're going to move on to the day of, we have pictures that we'll be showing about your wedding day, but there's some, as in life, the excitement and the beauty and the jubilation of a wedding can often be also followed by sadness. And you have a story that's very poignant about your wedding and your engagement and how brave you were for holding it all together. And you had no siblings to give you any support. So can you talk a little about that?
Well, shortly after we got engaged in February, really, I just kept going to school every day, teaching, and I was home on Christmas vacation, and my father was stricken with a fatal heart attack, and I was just going outside to go downtown and get my paycheck for the week, and he fell down, and that was it. And so everything was kind of in an upheaval there for a bit, and the question of can we go ahead with the wedding
Mm-hmm.
was hanging out there, and my mother decided that would still be all right. And we were getting married in August, and that gave us, about 6 months of time for things to settle. And we got married in my home church, and we still attend that church when we were in New Bedford. And walked myself down the aisle,
Mm-hmm.
and onward and upward after that.
Yeah.
We had our reception in the local New Bedford hotel, and it was very pretty and
Mm-hmm.
all of this, and we went on a honeymoon to the Poconos.
Mm-hmm.
Penn Hills and Poconos.
And
Yeah. Her car was newer than mine.
Oh, good.
Not new, but newer.
Newer.
So we took her car. It was a Ford Mustang. And we were about halfway there. We're up in the hills in the Poconos, and the car overheated. Well, I used to tinker with cars a little bit, so I brought
Still
some
does.
tools with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I
and the
pulled
toolbox
over,
was this big.
took the thermostat out, and there was a creek nearby. So I got some water out of the creek, poured it in the radiator so we could keep going.
Oh, very ingenious.
And so it was hot. The car didn't have air conditioning. So it was a warm day, hot day. I had the window down. Well, the bee flew into the car. That scared the hell out of me. I'm swerving
Yeah.
and she's screaming because I'm
I don't even remember that.
jerking the wheel, and I thought I was going to get stung, but I didn't get stung. And then off we went.
Yeah. So now 3 years later, after the wedding and the honeymoon, you have your first child.
5 years later.
Oh, 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
5
had
years.
5
years
years
later.
to live large.
Yes, 5 years before you have your first son.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you have a second son.
Of the 3.
And then you have the third son. So you have nicely spaced young men and siblings for each other. That enters a new part of
Now you're
a
turning
marriage.
the page.
Yes, you're turning the page from love and each other, and it's only the two of you, and only the two of you to worry about. As a mother and a father, as opposed to husband and wife, that adds a burden of decisions
Responsibility.
and responsibilities, but they're not a burden because you love them so much. But it also has a burden on your relationship because there's so much going on, working, having a house to take care of, children to take care of, and worrying about them, and worrying about their future and how you're going to afford college and all those things that start the minute you see the baby in the hospital and you go, oh, this is so beautiful. Oh my God, I'm going to be responsible for the rest of my life.
Oh, yeah.
And so I do have 3 children. So in that part of your life, how do you envision what it was going on? Did you see it as a whirlwind? Did you see it as a charting day by day or week by week?
Well,
How
we
did
got
you
off
live?
to a rough start because Michael was born prematurely.
Oh,
Michael was born in September when he was supposed to be born in November, and I
Yeah.
stayed after school for a meeting on a Monday, and
I was at work, and she called, and she said, Jimmy, my water broke.
no,
So
well, that
I
was the
said,
next day.
Hmm?
That was the next day,
All right, the next day.
and I had stayed home because I had a cold. I wasn't feeling good.
mm-hmm.
I went out to cover the tomatoes, and
I used to garden.
yes. So we were home, and I thought I'd make myself a cape to cover my ever-growing baby. And I'm crawling around on the floor, laying out the cloth and all, and there goes the water. So baby was on the way, and the baby wasn't going to say no.
Mm-hmm.
So off to the hospital, 4 minutes away in Framingham, we went. And actually, I went.
Yeah.
I think I drove myself.
See, the
Does it ever
memories
work?
start to come back.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Yes, so now you have one and you think that's wonderful. And you're a dad and you're a mom and it's just wonderful. and you have all of the rituals that go with having the child, the baptism, the parties, the birthday parties, and number 2 comes along. And number 2, you think, well, I've already done 1. But when number 2 shows up, it's a whole different mix. Once again, your marriage is in upheaval because you're going to be places, you're going to have to do things, you're going to have to take on more responsibilities for those little guys. And were you still working then? Or
Oh,
did
yes,
you take
I worked right through everybody except I took the year off after Peter, number 2, was born. I stayed home that year, and we were living in Framingham then, so we had neighborhood play group and going to the library for story time, and out in the stroller in the playground nearby. So it was good times.
How many private trips to the beach did you have during that time?
Quite a few, because we lived in Framingham, and right next to Framingham Union Hospital is a Larned Pond, and it was a little town beach. So I would take the 2 boys, Michael, who was then 3, and Peter in the baby seat, to the beach sometimes.
But not.
Daddy was
Jim.
at work.
Exactly. So
So
there were
you-
no more rendezvous at the beach
No.
for just the 2 of you. And of course, then the 3rd one arrives. What is the most challenging thing you found outside of the children, which are beautiful? I mean, mine are in their 40s, and I think yours are around that age. And you have grandchildren, which are just a blessing. I have 2. But what about the crisis moments, where we were talking about this a little bit earlier. What brought on the most dissidence in your relationship? Was it the rules about raising the children? Was it finances and how we're going to balance, who's going to take care of the money and who's going to do this? Or household chores, whose job is it anyway? And I was very fortunate. I married a retired chef because I didn't know how to cook. And so I've never cooked in 50 years, except recently when he was sick and I had to cook. And he showed me how to make coffee and did everything. So I was totally helpless. But we had divided lines. I took care
yes.
of this and you take care of this. And how did you work that out? What was your answer to those critical questions about who's in charge of what?
Well, I think we both had to pitch in. I know that I changed diapers for 9 years, and back then, initially, it was cloth diapers that had to be laundered. Then we switched to Pampers when they came out. But after 9 years, I was sort of glad I didn't have to change diapers anymore.
Yeah.
Got pretty good at it, but anyway, bathing the kids and trying to feed them.
You're always juggling.
It was a juggling.
2 kids. So you can do
Working
1 each
full-time
apiece.
and-
Yeah. The 3rd ones, there are not enough adults.
I was still in the National Guard at the time, and I remember one time I was away at summer camp, and she called me because the water heater burst in the cellar, and it was water, and she went to
There was
Home
water
Depot and bought a water
everywhere.
heater.
Oh my
So
goodness.
the diversification of the duties,
Now, can you cook?
a little bit,
Little.
a little bit.
I feel a cough coming
I
on.
can make breakfast.
Yes.
Eggs and pancakes and that
yeah.
sort of thing.
I make the pancake mix.
She makes the batter, I do the cooking.
Oh, okay. I'm the cleanup. I'm the person
do
who
that
washes
too.
all the dishes, and
Yeah, I do that too.
and he doesn't like me in the kitchen. So after he's finished cooking, I go in and clean, and that's how it works.
Oh.
Nobody gets angry at anybody else because you don't ever let them catch you using a knife or something that's not for cooking. Because I was trying to open a can of old strawberries. You remember when they used to come in?
In a
And
box
in a
with
box,
a metal edge.
And I was sawing it with one of his
Oh my
coloring.
gosh, you're lucky you're
coloring-
still married.
Yes, that was a very,
Dull the blade.
and it had a sharp object in his hand.
Yeah, our 3rd son has done some chefing, and he used to carry his knives to work in like a little briefcase.
Mhm. Oh yeah, don't
Yeah.
touch them because they'll get really angry. Are you, as now, gone beyond the midlife crisis of, oh my goodness, I'm getting older, to knowing who you are as people? You're no longer thinking, what am I going to be when I grow up? Or am I good enough to be this? Or now you're doing what? Are you pursuing your passions? Are you focused on each other? Do you travel a lot together? Because I'm hoping in the next 5 or 6 minutes we can start giving some advice to the newlyweds out there who have no clue. When you're just blinded by the beauty of love between two people and the joy they bring you, and what your requirements were for a wife. I had a list of things I was looking for a husband.
Like buying a house, you check
Yes,
off the boxes.
You check off the boxes. Okay, this has a fireplace, that'll do. But my most important thing was that he had to have a sense of humor, but not a person who told jokes, but he, just that witty little back and forth. And 50 years and we're still making each other laugh, which is, I think, what holds you together when you really want to strangle them. And I'm sure he that day with the knife, he was really contemplating that. So what was your dream idea of what you were going to do next after you moved to Westboro and after you had your children all graduate from high school and they go to college?
Oh yeah, you say, but it's not so.
What's up with that?
Just when you think you're getting out from under, you really aren't, because you carry your kids with you your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take on the worries about grandchildren.
Yes.
So you don't just stop with your kids.
She's done a lot of babysitting for the grandkids when they were small.
Yeah.
She would travel to Watertown at the time. Michael was living in Watertown when his kids started coming along, and she's driven up to Tewksbury a lot, the babysitting up there.
They each asked me, the two boys with kids, will you give us a year? 1 day a week.
Mm-hmm.
Childcare is very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, well, Peter came first, although he was the middle son. And I'd go up there on Mondays. And then a few years later, 3 years later, I think, Michael had first child, Benny, and said, Mom,
Can you
would
give
you
me
give
that?
us So
Same
one of
here.
them had Monday and one of them had Wednesday.
Oh,
And
but it's so wonderful when you see the genetic flow of your lives. Your children having children is just amazing, and it's a different love, but it's so strong when you see those little babies.
and you get to do the kid thing all
Yes.
over again.
Now, advice to the next generation. I was telling Jim that my husband gave me for our 25th, I think it was, anniversary, this little wooden box that was engraved on the top that said, "Marriage is falling in love with the same person day after day, over and over." So I found a little box, because I'm a realist, and it said, "But yesterday you really ticked me off." And so I put that inside the box. And that's when we ever get into one of those kind of crunchy times where we just read the top of the box and then open the other one and we start laughing. We just say, okay, we're fine.
Oh, that's great.
That's a good
So
idea. Everybody
what-
should get a little box.
Yes, it says something very sweet on it. And then another one that was very apropos. I mean, it fit right inside the other one. It was like perfect. So we'll start with Doc. Do you have any advice for the newlywed about longevity, how to keep the romance, the spark of love, the spark of friendship? Because you have to be friends.
I'd say you got to give when you don't always feel like giving. You got to do something that might not be what you want to do, but it's going to keep the ship floating.
Do you have an example that's not too...
What? I guess, can we say that I always cook? Always and never are not good words to use.
Mhm.
Bad adverbs.
You
But-
go, except when we go out to eat, you cook dinner. You obviously.
And I make the pancake better.
Yeah.
You make the pancake
And you make
batter, and you
pancakes.
always cook a full meal. Yeah,
But do you clean up?
I help clean up. Yeah, and I'm the guy that empties the dishwasher.
And the trash.
Trash. My job's to empty the dishwasher, take the trash out, vacuum,
Take the papers and the trash.
things like that. Fix
So
things that break.
what have you done? She said you have to sometimes do things you don't want to do to keep the ship steady. What are some little things that you have to do in order to keep the ship steady?
Keep the ship steady.
Mm-hmm.
I bite my tongue a lot.
A lot of canker sores there.
Yeah.
Laundry.
And sometimes I don't bite the tongue, and
Uh-huh.
that becomes obviously an issue.
Yeah.
Trying to resolve. I think one of the biggest things people contemplating getting married probably got to talk about beforehand is how we're going to deal with family finances.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Sometimes one person is better with money or better with numbers than the other one.
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe you start out with one checkbook
Mm-hmm.
and then you don't.
Do you have a budget? Are you going to try to live within a budget, or what are you going to do? I'll be very honest. We had one checkbook when we started, and that really didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So she has hers, and I have mine. She's with one bank, and I'm with a credit union.
Mm-hmm.
And my pension goes directly, electronically, into the credit union that I had when I was working. And that seems to work pretty well. When it comes to paying taxes and other required bills, kind of split it a little bit, you know.
Another time when you got to learn to divide by 2.
Keeping
Yes.
things, trying not to get in trouble, don't want to fall behind.
Yes.
I think we both have very good credit ratings because we're responsible about
Good.
paying our bills.
And who worries more?
I worry a lot.
Oh, I don't know about that.
She does too.
So
You
you
can stew in your own head,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah. She apparently doesn't dream. I dream. Every night I have a dream. And usually I'm happy when I wake up because I realize the dream's not real.
Oh, good. And then you look over and you realize the dream is real.
Yeah, and reach over and touch her.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, still here.
Good,
Everything's
good.
okay.
Good. What would be advice in terms of how did you bring up the discussion of children? Did you always know you wanted children? I mean, did you pick him specifically because he said, I'm open to having kids?
I think Dot brought it up and said, we've been married 5 years. If we're going to have children, it's time to start.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay,
Oh,
sure.
so the give and take was there, but you were the one who
Yeah, I
mentioned
think
it.
Dot decided that it was time to start a family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a scary proposition
Yes.
going ahead. It's gonna hurt, to
Yes.
say the least.
I was with her. We went to the pre-birth classes,
Good.
and I put on the garbs and the booties. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember that when Michael she was in labor in Framingham Union, I had the scrubs on and everything, because I was going to go into the delivery room, operating room,
No,
Delivery.
delivery.
delivery room. And someone walked up to me and said, "Are you a doctor?"
You went, oh, no,
I said, no, I'm not a doctor.
You
But- so
could've
I would,
delivered it.
I was back then, the way they did it was the husband would be by her head
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of hold her hand
Yeah.
and whatever. But I was in there, all 3 kids, I was
Yes,
in there
good.
each time.
And from Matthew, we had to make the run from Westboro to Framingham.
Mm,
So that one.
Yes.
yeah,
So those are the things that bind you together. Family, your past histories of having the same ethnic background helps with knowing
Pretty much.
customs, that you have the same religious philosophy. You're not trying to mix 2 cultures together, which can often be difficult. And as you get older, those things become not even an issue that you can almost remember. It's now what lies ahead. That we know that time is precious, and the time we spend together is even more precious. And so it's almost like falling, at least I see with the 2 of you and what I've felt with my husband, is that you start to fall in love again when you get older and older, because time is so important. It's like when you're the first rush of love, you want to get married as soon as possible. Well, it's that same feeling because everyone has an ending, and we have to enjoy every moment. So that's how I view this stage of my marriage, and I can see the way you were rolling your eyes a little at him and he was tilting his head towards you, that there's still that fun and companionship.
yeah.
So you
We
are
take a few vacations a year.
Few
We're going to
vacations.
Orlando in
Okay.
March.
Yeah. Well, I never took up fishing.
Nope, we don't.
Oh, we
And
don't
I've-
fish. We don't fish. We have
You
a
know,
boat,
my
but we don't
husband
fish.
fishes. No, and so we have different things that we do, and we're involved in the community in different things,
Yeah.
but not. We don't have a lot of the same. So we don't try to be like the person you always see going together. We have our own paths to what we want to do. So I want to thank you both for joining us in this month of Valentine's Day and thinking of new love that we have to recognize and appreciate and celebrate those that have had a lifetime of love and companionship. So I'm so happy for you both. And you've been wonderful guests.
Thank
so
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank you
much
for
for joining us.
Inviting us.
Thanks very
Yes.
much.
Thank you for joining us. And hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. And I look forward to you joining us next month.